Okay. No theme. Hello. 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 Gee, you have my microphone open. Sorry, I didn't know that. Well, we're not going to use the theme song tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about Mr. Kennedy and a lot of other associated problems and facts of American life if we can. And if you're expecting any great revelations or banjo playing tonight, I don't think you'll get it. However, I wonder, it's difficult to say some of the things that you have to say, at times, but this has probably been one of the most significant, if not the most significant weekends that any of us will ever live through. And not just because the president passed, but because of a lot of other associated things that it says about American life, about American attitudes and American mores today. I remember the first time that I heard about Kennedy, and I suppose many of you remember a few of these things. I can recall, that one of the most interesting aspects to history,
in my experience, is how easily and how quickly people change their story, or forget what they said, or forget what they felt, or forget even what they knew over a comparatively short time. And I can remember the first time that I heard of Kennedy. This was back in the days when Ike was president, and Kennedy began to be heard just a little bit about. And I remember sitting one night in a guy's apartment, and we were talking about politics and the whole phenomenon of American politics. And he was really the hot under the collar type, the idealist, the burning idealist, the angry man who subscribes to all the magazines, the right ones, who subscribes to all the right causes, and this is even more important, who is always generally considered in our time and in our world a sensitive, truthful man. Well, we're sitting there, and he was really bugged, and he was saying, among other things, that he felt that one of the problems with American politics and politics in general was that it's usually run by old men. It's usually in the hands of men who don't have energy. Idealism has long since disappeared from their lives. Dreams have disappeared, and there they are. They're old men, and they don't really know what's going on in the world of the now. This was his whole thesis, which is a reasonable one, although not necessarily a true one. This was his feeling. And then in the course of the conversation, he says, he said, have you ever heard of Jack Kennedy? And I'd heard of Senator Kennedy, that's all, just very vague name, like many senators, you hear the senator from Illinois or the senator from Utah or something, a name. And he says, now this is an example of a guy who obviously will never possibly be elected president of the United States. Why? He's young, he's too young, he's got ideas, he's got idealism, he's dedicated in one thing and another. Well, I don't have to tell you that shortly after Mr. Kennedy was elected, this was one of the first guys I heard yelling about the fact that Kennedy was too young and didn't have wisdom. Well, it's a very interesting problem in America, this thing, and it's a common thing. But I wonder how many of you were at the Coliseum when Kennedy made his appearance, his first big campaign appearance here just before the election. He'd made several other appearances, I guess, but this was the last big swing through the country, and I believe it was after the television debates with Mr. Nixon, and he was appearing at the Coliseum. And, of course, millions of people went down there, and there was a general air among the people in the auditorium and among the people who, at least certainly the ones that were around me, that he was a very interesting man, that he was unquestionably magnetic and had a lot of ideas and had proven that he has courage, but that he would not be elected. I wonder how many people recall that feeling that was in the air that he wouldn't be elected. Well, I remember we're sitting in the audience there, and somebody gave me a big plastic hat. You know, these big imitation straw hats they were handing out during the campaign that looked like the straw skimmer things. You know, they were big white hats, and around the brim was a paper band, the red, white, and blue band, and it had Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson in little pictures all the way around, and it said "Hooray for Kennedy" or something on the side. I still have the hat, by the way. I still have this. And I remember getting this hat, and Kennedy came out. He must have been about a half an hour late, and there were a few showbiz types who'd gotten up and done a little bit, one kind of a bit or another. And when Kennedy came out, of course, everyone applauded, and they were kind of polite, and they were also sort of enthusiastic, but it was the kind of enthusiasm that people showed for something they didn't believe would happen. Do you remember some of the campaign appearances that Adlai Stevenson made? It was very much the same thing, where they felt, well, gee, you know, he's a wonderful man and all, but it just won't happen. So everyone sort of applauded and went home. Well, I remember the astonishment the day after the election among many people when Kennedy was elected, and by such a wildly narrow margin. Well, from that moment on, and I must say this as a kind of a personal postscript, I've always been a Kennedy man, and for probably different reasons than you can always state. You don't know why you like a certain person. It's very hard to know all the personal things that you got within you that make you lean towards a man or make you believe in a man and so on. But the one thing that I have always noticed about Kennedy that appealed to me specifically was that Kennedy was a realist. And being a realist in today's world is very dangerous, because realism is not a thing that is easily accepted by America in the 1960s. And I always felt sorry for Kennedy because I recognized the fact that Kennedy did not give people the soft pap that most of them somehow wanted on both sides of any political fence. Did you see the discussion that, of course, this we should take one thing at a time, but I think one of the great problems that lies in America today in connection with the presidency, and I can't tell you how deeply I feel this, is our current trend, and it's been going on for some years in this country, to lay the blame for all economic and social conditions at the very feet of the president personally. In short, there are many people who really do believe somehow that Kennedy created, if not created, he is in large part responsible for the Cuban situation, we'll say. That many people really believe that Kennedy could have solved the race problem, the civil rights problem. In fact, it gets to the point now today where in American writing life, humor life, where the very things of which our life is made, the very problems that confront all of us as Americans, are taken as showbiz gambits. And no telling how much this fans, no telling how much hatred this engenders, and incidentally, how much truth that it covers up. For example, not more than 2 weeks ago, I remember being not only irritated, but I was blindly angry when I saw a cartoon that appeared in one of the local newspapers, which, by the way, has a reputation for truth and anger and an interest in liberal causes and one thing and another. A cartoon that showed, it was a big cartoon, it showed President Kennedy, the late president, and he was holding up a large sign. And on this sign it said, and you could see people all around him in the background, people who were looking up sort of hopefully, and Kennedy had this large sign, and he was a towering figure, and he looked sort of sinister in the cartoon, and he was holding a large demonstrator sign, and the sign said, "Freedom later." The implication, of course, by that cartoon was that Kennedy himself was blocking the civil rights program, that Kennedy himself was not trying to do as much as he could with it. Well, this infuriated me because anyone who reads more than the headlines, I have a feeling today that the only difference between the liberals and the right-wingers is that the liberals read the headlines from certain newspapers and the right-wingers read the headlines from other newspapers. Hardly any of them read the stories. But nevertheless, I couldn't imagine how a man who has read anything in the newspapers in the last 6 months could conceivably draw a cartoon like this. And yet there it was, and it was so proudly shown in the paper that they reprinted it the next week. They thought it was such a telling shot. Well, it is this kind of playing fast and loose with the truth for the purpose of doing a good cartoon or doing a good nightclub gag that in the end could very well bring the bricks and the foundation of our democracy down around us. Because no telling how many people take this sort of thing literally as truth, They really believe this is a truth thing that this man has said. But this phenomenon is comparatively new to America. The phenomenon of believing that the president personally can solve the issues of our day. He can have a great effect on them, there's no question about that. But whether or not he can, under our system, do the miracles and do the great, vast, sweeping changes overnight that people seem to want is a question. In fact, Mr. Kennedy himself, perhaps maybe some of you saw the rebroadcast of the superb television show that Kennedy did at the time of his second anniversary in office, just a comparatively short time ago, around 10, 11 months ago. Mr. Kennedy was being interviewed by 4 or 5 newsmen, and he was talking about the problems of being a president. And this is an extremely intelligent man. Not only that, he was a man with humor, and that all right there makes a lot of people mad at him. He was a man of obvious zest. He dug life, and that makes a lot of people mad. He enjoyed life, and he was no question about it. He was a superb looking man. He looked good. He had everything that most men dream of someday, dream of having if everything had worked out right, but they didn't quite have. Anyway, Mr. Kennedy was discussing the problems of the presidency, and he said, there is no way for a man who is president to be able to tell the other people how it feels to be president. And they asked him, well, what have you learned? He says, well, I've learned from one thing, I've learned that being president is very different from what I thought it was. And this is obviously true. And then he went on to say that one of the problems in being president is that people seem to expect miracles. And he said, let's take the civil rights situation. He says, I presented a bill to Congress. I've fought for it. I sent troops to Birmingham. And I've done everything I can do under our system. And he said, and yet people want me to do more, apparently. He says, I don't quite know what I can do. He said, but I believe that what the people really want, who advocate me doing more, they don't really want a democratic system. That's an important point. They don't really want a democratic system. That the presidency is the only office in America, the only elected office of total representation. By that I mean he's the only man in the country who represents everybody in the country. And there's a difference between a ruler and a leader. And I suspect that today people have the two confused. If they have a specific kind of legislation they want, and Mr. Kennedy seems to be for it, why doesn't he get it in? Why doesn't he merely just sign a paper or do something or blow somebody up or somehow bullet through? Well, under other systems of government, they don't have this problem. The leader is a ruler, and he doesn't have these problems. Oh, by the way, this is WOR AM and FM New York.